Hi everybody, this is episode 3 of The Compliance Coach. Today the question is, why is everybody talking about artificial intelligence in compliance? So on this topic, we had already a previous session when we talked about the top 10 challenges in compliance in 24, and artificial intelligence came out as number 1. So in this dedicated session, we're talking about the histories, the types of artificial intelligence, and what kind of opportunities it might generate as well for compliance. So in the words of a famous artist who said, artificial intelligence is not about replacing minds, it's about empowering them to reach new heights of innovation and understanding. We will check out whether this quote is exactly like that in compliance, what are the impacts on this one, and what is the outlook for 24-25. Myself, I'm Ralf Ebert, I'm the compliance coach. 20 years of experience in the compliance section for international as well as Swiss private banks, in international hubs all over the world, keynote speakers on this topic. So stay tuned with me on this YouTube channel, thinking and impacting compliance differently. Hey, let's talk about artificial intelligence and the definition. And I know there's a lot of definitions out there. The one that I find the most best to my eyes is artificial intelligence refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and learn like humans. The goal of AI is to develop systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and language translation. I think that incorporates all functionalities, to which we will come in a second. Now, if we look on the history of artificial intelligence, it's quite old, because the first researches have been done already by Alan Turing in 1956. Due to cost-limited computing powers, that has been not pursued, and only in 2012 there came the first kind of deep learning elements into the world of the machine learning programs that had been already occurred. So that was the next step that we have seen. So roughly 60 years later, we're coming to the next phase. And then as cycles get closer, in 2012, we had the deep learning phase for machine learning, which give rise to another concept and the possibility of even treating more data in that sense. And in particular in 2017, with the development of the transformer architecture, the deep learning become really the next level. Now, in the AI spring, as we call it, started in 2020 when the so-called generative AI took in. And it was not only so far in terms of making human processes easier in this machine learning, data recognition, etc., but taking a next step in terms of simulation, meaning learning from behavioral elements from human beings and replicating it in data that is so convincing that you could think that has been generated by human beings. So that's in the moment where we are. ChatGPT by OpenAI in 2023, the open release and open source model, is of course the next one, making it accessible now for more than 100 millions of users. And that is the history to AI in a nutshell. Now, if you look on the types of AI, I have concentrated only on 3 of them. Machine learning, I have already reiterated that, and we come to that as well as part of being already implemented in the compliance world. We have the NLPs, the natural language processing, and then of course is a technology which enables the machines to understand, interpret it, and generate human language, which has of course that element of going beyond what we have seen in the past. And it's crucial, of course, for a lot of applications that we use in our daily elements, like language translation, sentiment analysis, etc. So last but not least, the computer vision. It's for me one of the most important parts, because it's interpreted as well the visual information and translate that as well either in words, data, or other recognizable data. So these 3 are on them: machine learning, the natural language processing, and computer vision. Let's have a look on the regulatory landscape of AI. And what is interesting is we observe exactly the same pattern of governments and authorities what we have seen in crypto and in blockchain, meaning in the context of the different cultures and the different approaches, we see quite advanced jurisdictions on this one, but a huge gap as well. I'll give you an example. In the moment, we have the OECD guidelines that have been published in 2018, last update in 2023, which provides the kind of principled approach to AI that have been taken up by Europe as well in the draft of the AI Act, which has been published in 21, still in the phase of being published at the end of 2023. So let's have a look what's happening in 24. India, for example, rejected completely any kind of AI rule so far with the standoff now. The US, for instance, set out already in October 22 the AI Bill of Rights Act, which of course states the principles expressed in the OECD, but so far didn't develop particular elements on this one. Now, what we see in this regulation are regular trends like it's a risk-based approach. It is sector agnostic and sector specific, meaning some sectors are taken out and some sectors are of course taken in. It's a policy alignment because don't forget, we have still elements like data protection, cybercrime, etc., which are correlated with the artificial intelligence. So therefore that of course has an impact. And last but not least, we see a strong collaboration in the private as well in the international sector in terms of setting that up. Now, if we look on the ethical concerns which are related to AI, it's with everything. It depends on what you do with this, and we come to that at a later stage. Now, you see, for instance, the possibility today with text generation engines goes very fast because it can convincingly change texts and speeches and registers, which of course might create sometimes the risk of misuse. Same is for voice imitation software, where you can imagine if your client is suddenly calling with a different voice imitation, it will be very difficult to find that out for a compliance officer. Last but not least, of course, the AI platforms are sometimes subject as well to compromising data that might even sometimes produce misinformation or disinformation. We saw that recently, especially with the geopolitical elements which are there, and can contribute to a global disruptive element. So there are, of course, ethical concerns out there. Do we need to be afraid? That is to be found out. And what is the impact on compliance? We come now in the next chapter. Let's have first a view on the situation, the status quo of technology in compliance. And if you see, for instance, that 6 to 10% of the profits by financial institutions are used for compliance costs, which represents, based on a McKinsey report in 2022, roughly to 214 billion. And on the contrary, you see that roughly in 2022, the penalties given by global authorities amassed to 4 billion USD, that there is a lot at stake. And how in the past compliance were dealing with the technology part, let me say, was quite limited. It was rules-based. There was a certain skepticism to any kind of new technology for obvious reasons, sometimes when it comes to protecting core banking systems, data protection elements, as well as dependencies on external providers. Now, we have seen, however, in the recent years, improvements in this regard. So purely from the statistical data, red flags in industries, for instance, a move towards more sophisticated data coming out in particular for the robot process automation, where a lot of data has been produced, end-to-end processes have been done better, and of course the so-called APIs, which are application programming interfaces, which allowed as well different softwares within the bank to communicate with each other, which heightened, of course, the data use within the bank. But I have to say the issue is that technology so far was always perceived as like the banks are running behind the criminals and not ahead of the curve. And therefore, it might be that AI is an opportunity in terms of changing that game. Why? Because it is, of course, the possibility in terms of changing a risk-based approach and a fear-based approach. What do I mean by that? Fear-based because we can expect that regulatory focus will increase on all kinds of activities, so making the bank's activity and compliance more at risk. And with the higher technology development, it will occur, as we have seen already, you will see in some examples that I will state basically in these kind of 5 business cases, that there is a higher positive impact to be expected. So the launch of compliance within this new technology is nearly upcoming and not avoidable. And last but not least, artificial intelligence is, of course, more flexible when it comes to integrating new trends, whereas the old statistical data needed a certain time of being re-implemented, reconfigured, and recalibrated. So opportunities weighs out the risk that has been observed. So let's have a look where AI has already a positive impact in compliance. And I have found out so far 5 zones of impact. Number 1 is the policy and regulatory landscape. So think about new policies coming up on an international level in the EU or the US. How then to incorporate that in your own policy landscape. And here AI helps already to identify what are the existing rules and how the new rules need to be embedded and applied. Not only a copy-paste exercise, but even an analysis in terms of what is the lack and proposing of how this report could be written. Talking of reports, we come to number 2 is KYC and suspicious activity reports. These reports as well need normally a high intensity of data collection, data analysis, which as well is already done by AI, subject to the use of internal data, which is in the systems, if you have an existing client, as well as data which is in so-called public sources or in commercial databases, and then holistically bring that together already in a pre-configured report, which is then always subject to a validation by a human being. So here you see the collaborative model about AI and human beings still expressed. Number 3 in that regard is name screening. So of course AI is capable of analyzing a much higher data set than any human being could do, much more quicker, and of course taking a lot of more data points into consideration. In terms of the impact, I will come to that in a second. Same applies to transaction monitoring. So here in particular, you have not only individuals, but transactional behavior. You have counterparts. For instance, somebody is using a company in terms of performing payments. That brings a certain complexity to the table, which is not always visible to even experienced compliance officer. Here as well, AI helps enormously to visualize the different transactions that have taken place and then already providing indications that here might be a pattern be used, which is doubtful or subject then to an activity report to be filed by the bank. And last but not least, the risk scoring, so to say, meaning as well in terms of what is the level of risk that a client brings to a bank holistically with the help of AI. That can be as well much further involved, always provided that you have the right data set available. So 5 zones of impact. Let's have a look of now where the future lies within AI. So what is now the impact of AI in compliance? And based on a McKinsey report, there are 3 major improvements to be expected. Number 1 is 40% increase of suspicious activity reports. Basically, to better data analysis, we expect by virtual assistants 50 to 7% activities in so-called recurrent tasks, which have been done in the past by human beings, and that will lead to 30% of efficiency gains. And I think very important here is that efficiency gains does not mean replacement by human beings, but that from a data collection perspective, human beings are now focusing in compliance on data validation, which is very important. So we've seen the opportunities and the impact of AI in compliance. Let's talk about the concern that AI could have for compliance as well. And I see 2 main points to be raised at that stage. Number 1 is availability of data. So AI can really help you enormously in your daily works when there is a minimum set of quality and quantity data available. Is this not the case, then traditional approaches of risk-based approach might be still preferable. The second one is with regard to so-called black box model. You would like to avoid that you are dependent on an AI technology where you have no influence and no understanding of how it has been calibrated and how the results have been produced. So that, I think, is the two elements that in particular are to be observed in that section. So let's now talk about how to implement AI technologies in compliance processes. And I've identified 4 elements which are really important in this process. And don't expect that that is a project that you're snipping the finger and it will be enrolled. That takes time, but it takes beforehand a clear vision and mission. So number 1 is skill set. So AI needs not only AML investigators, so people that have a very good compliance knowledge, it needs as well data modeling teams and data analysts. And that, in one of my previous episodes, I was talking about to getting these talents in the bank. So without them, it's quite difficult. So that is very important skill set. Number 2 is the specific governance model, meaning you need to already from the beginning define of how frequently you validate your models, who does it, and what's the outcome of it. Without it, you're running the risk, what we talked just about, creating a black box model. Number 3, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. Don't think that with compliance in the lead, that AI comes to its full diversity within the bank. You need to act upon the implementation with different stakeholders, whether it's from business risk management, business risk, etc., in terms of having a holistic view that people collaborate and contribute at an early stage so that the outcome is as well in the right side. And last but not least, very important is to ensure a safe transition period, meaning between switching off the traditional old system and getting into the new world of AI, you should always have a dual approach that for both sides it is ensured that during the transition period things are running correctly. So to wrap it up, AI in compliance has already created the first impact and it will create even higher impact with time. Time is very important because the implementation, as we have seen, will take time, it will take vision, and it will take resources, the right skill set of resources. But without AI, compliance will not be capable of maintaining the game where we're in. So that's, I think, is very important for me. Thank you for listening and joining this episode. I hope to see you soon on this channel, The Compliance Coach, and thinking and impacting compliance differently.